Good evening, Councilmember Bonds.
Thank you, everyone, and good evening to DC for Democracy and all of their friends that are watching us tonight. I want to thank you for hosting this important forum. It is a tad early in the season, but I think it's a good opportunity for us to come before the public. It's an honor to join you this evening to talk about the future of our great city. I want you to know that throughout my career in public service, my focus has been on strengthening the district's community by improving the quality of life for everyone. And I do everything that I can to focus on what is good for the city as a whole. And that's my approach in legislation and oversight. And frankly, I am really proud of my record to improve the quality of life for all residents. Some of the things that I have done and that are very important to me as chair of the Housing Committee since 2016, I invested a record amount of money in affordable housing. That is the creation or the renovation of affordable units using the Housing Production Trust Fund. Alone, we created over 7,000 units. DC is now a national leader when it comes to affordable housing, the creation of affordable housing, the attending to affordable housing, so much so that our investments have greatly increased and the mayor has been pretty generous with the investments. She says that 400 million is not too much, and we say we need even more because the need, we believe, is great. We also were very lucky to have $100 million in federal funds from the ARP program that helped us through the pandemic. I propose and join my colleagues at the council to pass the emergency eviction moratorium in response to COVID. And for those tenants and rent control units, most recently, I placed a moratorium on voluntary agreements contributing to maintaining housing affordability in the city. So that's pretty much my record. And of course, everyone knows how fond I am of doing everything I possibly can to make our city affordable for our seniors. So that's who I am, and I have much more to share, I hope, this evening with you, and ideas that I'm excited to talk to you about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Ms. Crawford, you're next. Please introduce yourself and tell us what's most personal to you about this run for the at-large council.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, DC for Democracy, friends and neighbors on the panel and in the audience watching. Greetings. My name is Sharice Crawford. I'm a proud third-generation native Washingtonian and elected DC Democratic Committee member and a small business owner here. I'm honored to be the transformational candidate that our city needs as the next at-large council member. By society standards, I was supposed to be a statistic, but I've transformed from what is now called, what we've called an at-risk youth, to surviving extreme poverty, food deserts, homelessness, and yes, unfortunately, 3 shootings on separate instances, to now being the first generation HBCU college graduate and the first in my family to run for office. I'm running to bring my formula of transformation to DC Council. I believe that every resident, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Mr. Fleming.
My name is Nate Fleming, and we need in our next council member a visionary leader with a track record of delivering results. And that's exactly what I've been doing, working alongside DC for Democracy for the past 12 years. First is DC's shadow representative, where we increased support for DC statehood in Congress by 400%. For the past 5 years, I've been working as a committee and legislative director at the council, director of the Committee on Legislation, Recreation, Libraries, and Youth Affairs. And I'm proud of the work we've done, including drafting the language to ban evictions during the pandemic, to mandate that more funding goes to very low income housing from the Housing Production Trust Fund. I drafted and worked to pass legislation that increased the funding that we received from the estate tax. So we put millions of dollars towards school-based mental health, mentoring, and violence prevention. But there's so much work that we need to be done, and we need a visionary leader that's going to do that. And I want to be that leader, and I hope to earn your endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Ms. Gore. You're on mute. Let's try that again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. My name is Lisa Gore. And Kimberly, I did have a very prepared statement, but your question was a little different. So I'm going to ask specifically what you asked of us. And that's what makes us so passionate about entering in this race. One of the things that spurred me to enter into this race is our current housing crisis in DC. We have an affordable housing crisis that's displaced many people of color. We have oversight issues with DC Housing Authority, oversight issues with Housing Production Trust Fund, and just a general lack of development for deeply affordable housing. My background is a special agent in federal housing issues with also oversight experience in that area. And that's what spurred me to jump into this race and why I'm excited to be here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gore. Ms. Jenkins.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Laniqua Dominique. I've owned and operated a companion camp care agency in the district for over a decade. I'm the proud aunt of 8, 3 of which I co-parent with my brother. I'm a former elected official, a successful children's book author, and I have several years of policy work and legislative experience on Capitol Hill and abroad. I'm trained and I've studied several languages, but what I'm most proficient is in interpreting the hearts of people. I'm running for many reasons, but the biggest is because of you. I have the skills, the preparation, and the record to create people-centered legislation. That means legislation with voters in mind. Some of the issues I'll be pointed towards are environmental justice, reducing crime, and increasing child literacy. Again, my name is Laniqua Dominique. I hope to earn your vote tonight and your support, and it will be the longest name on the ballot. Look for it, #Jenkins for DC.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jenkins. Mr. Lane, you're up next.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ambrose Lane Jr., and I have no intention of speaking in political speak. I'm running because the current times require leadership that understands and can respond to modern challenges. Challenges today require rapid, adaptable, and innovative thinking. They require transformative approaches to problem solving, as well as compassion for past grievances. The theme of my campaign is healing and transformation. There's some healing going on now, but we also need to heal the pre-COVID conditions of communities in Washington, D.C. that have never been solved. As your next at-large DC Democratic council member, I will strive to help our city heal from the old divisions and from the recent disruptions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lane. Mr. Thomas.
Good evening, I'm Bradley Thomas, and I was all prepared to open by talking about why I'm uniquely suited to serve on the council at just such a time as this. But instead, I want to talk about an issue that cuts to the core of my being. We in the district are under attack. Not only have the Republicans in the Senate and a couple of so-called Democrats blocked DC statehood, but now the GOP is threatening that if they take over the House in November, they're going to repeal DC home rule. This is an assault on basic human rights. Every candidate here, every current DC elected official, and everybody listening at home needs to stand up with voice and with vote and say enough is enough. You know, my parents taught me that wrong is wrong if everybody else is doing it, and right is right if nobody else is doing it. I'm standing up for DC, and even if I have to stand alone. I posted an article on my website a month ago entitled, "Is Injustice Anywhere Still a Threat to Justice Everywhere?" Please go to votebradleythomas.com and read that article. You'll get a good feel for my core beliefs around people, principles, and progress. Bottom line is that I care.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And Mr. Williams.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I want to thank DC4D for hosting this forum. And also, I just want to give a special shout out to the organization. I'm a longtime active member of DC4D. I served on the steering committee for 2 years. And also DC for Democracy was the organization that introduced me to citywide politics. I was one of the leaders of the Fair Elections Coalition. And I'm proud that every candidate in this race is participating in the program. For those of you who may not know me well, I'm a native Washingtonian. I grew up in Ward 7 in Hillcrest. My mom, she's a retired DC public schools teacher, and my dad, he's a retired corrections officer with the DC Department of Corrections. In terms of my career, I worked in the nonprofit sector, I've worked in the public sector, and I've also worked at the DC Council as a policy staffer. One of the reasons I got into this race is because we're at a crossroads in our city. You know, we have a housing crisis, we have deep inequities in our school system, and I don't have to tell you all that crime is on the rise. And so I'm looking forward to using this. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We're going to get started with a few questions, actually several questions. The first question, you each will have 2 minutes to respond. And following, we will do 3 questions via video from DC residents. So let's get started with the first one. Again, you'll have 2 minutes to respond. We are rotating the order. Ms. Jenkins, you will be starting first. So here we go. Affordable housing advocates have complained for years that the Housing Production Trust Fund has not prioritized enough deeply affordable housing. That is, housing affordable to families earning up to 30% of the area median income and who are most at risk of displacement. What are your proposals for building more deeply affordable housing? Again, 2 minutes for each of you for the responses, and we'll begin first with you, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you for that question. It's massive. We all know that affordable housing is not affordable, particularly for someone like myself. I'll use me as the case study. I have a multi-generational family. That means I live with my mom, my father, 3 nieces and nephews, a dog, and my brother. And I think that when we talk about affordable housing, we also have to include generational displacement and what it looks like when a family with 3 generations can't afford to live in the city, and then it leads to wipeout. One of the things that I truly support, and I think we should lean into, is the GAIN Act that Robert White proposed, and it's basically securing already existing housing. We don't have to build or develop or create new real estate. We're basically securing real estate that already exists. It's quicker, it's cheaper, and we expedite the process of getting people housed at an affordable price. We place the houses under a covenant. That means that we're able to give the renters or the people that own the property the capital up front for the amount of time that they're under the contract of the covenant, and it incentivizes them renting at a lower cost and providing affordable housing. I think that when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about people. And if we care about people being able to afford and live in the city and age in place and having families here, we need to also consider that our investments and our policies should reflect our hearts, which is people. So we need to invest in affordable housing and make sure that it's truly affordable and not just a hashtag or a soundbite, that it's truly practical for families and working people.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jenkins. Next up, Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Kim. I don't even think you can have a rational conversation about housing affordability without talking about incomes. If you can't talk about incomes, it's a non-starter. Let me give you an example. In 2000, the year 2000, the DC median income for families with children in Ward 8 was $27,000. 19 years later in 2019, it was only $31,000. Ward 7 had a family median income of $33,000. It only has a median income now of $36,000. By contrast, in Ward 2, you had in 2000 a median income of $47,000, and now you have a median income, family income of $202,000, almost $203,000. How can you have a realistic conversation without dealing with the issue of incomes and the lack of jobs and the lack of rise in incomes in certain parts of the city? But what I would do to answer your question would be to propose legislation to increase to 75% the funds in the Housing Production Trust Fund. Right now, it's at 50%, and it would be dedicated to what I call very affordable housing, which is 45% or lower AMI. I would also seek to mandate that the Housing Production Trust Fund monies be dedicated to the housing and urban development model of 30-30-30 AMI within developments, creating mixed income developments. The city's policy, whether or not it's written or not, is a de facto way of gentrifying its way out of housing, out of jobs, and out of its health crises. And we have to put that to an end by changing and transforming the way we talk about these issues. If we can't talk about income, how do we even begin to talk to families about getting affordable housing? Can't happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, you're up next.
Thank you. You know, median family income for the District of Columbia is based on what people earn throughout the metropolitan area, including our wealthy suburbs. And as of last July, median family income for a family of four was $129,000 a year. So even at 30%, we're still talking about $38,700 a year. And sadly, so many of our DC families don't even earn that much. When you consider the average rent of a two-bedroom apartment in DC is $3,430 a month, that comes out to $41,160 a year. And it's clear that people need help. So even if that 30% MFI family could squeeze into a studio apartment, which is ridiculous, the annual rent would be $22,692, or 59% of that family's income. So we have to maximize the use of housing trust funds to help low-income families. And by the way, we have to do a better job of maintaining oversight of that fund. But I would seriously consider several things. I consider converting surplus government buildings into residential spaces. I would consider creating opportunity zones with steeply subsidized rents and mortgages for public service-related workers like teachers, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and newly minted medical service providers who are burdened with school debt. And I would strengthen and enforce inclusionary zoning laws that require developers to get serious about providing housing that is truly affordable for low-income earners. We're not doing a very good job of that right now. We've got a very low threshold in terms of what these developers have to provide. And I would advocate that we should increase and raise that threshold so that we can provide greater opportunities for housing for those who are in the low income range.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
You're welcome.
Mr. Williams, you're up next and Ms. Crawford will follow. So Mr. Williams.
Thank you. I agree with everything that my colleague said, but I think if we're going to implement any of these policies and ideas, we just have to be honest and call the truth out for what it is. We need new leadership with the Housing Committee. I mean, right now we have a Housing Production Trust Fund that is not managed well. The money is not being spent wisely. You have a lot of the subsidies going towards luxury apartments, and we have a committee that is not willing to provide aggressive oversight. You know, this is an important issue to me. I was born and raised in this city. You know, gentrification is real. There are a lot of people who I went to school with, you know, who I grew up with in Fairfax Village, who are no longer here. And I think if we're serious about housing affordability, we really need new leadership. One of the things that I'm really looking at, I think we need to study is a social housing model. I think that we need to take seriously the looking at converting office buildings downtown to residential. I think that those are all great models, but if we're serious about this, I think we need a change in leadership first.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Crawford, you're up next and Mr. Fleming will follow you.
Yes, can you hear me okay? Wonderful. If my grandmother Beulah May Crawford was here from Langston Terrace, where she raised my mom and orphans and provided secure housing, she would say that the $82 million that was misappropriately spent needs to be reimbursed by the committee first. The auditor said that those dollars were not appropriately used. We testified at the committee to say so. And following my testimony at the committee, it seemed as if the developers were coerced into saying that they were unable to build at 0 to 30% AMI. And then the other additional problem is that RFPs are going out maybe 5 to 4 weeks in advance notice. I think there needs to be greater and stronger oversight in maintaining and watching that oversight is done appropriately. And RFPs give developers time enough who have capacity to build at 0 to 30% AMI. Nextly, we have colonies of affordable housing that need to be turned into cooperative ownership opportunities. The problem is that we have been shut out of access to equity. We've been shut out of access to ownership. We've been shut out of access to participating in the buying of the land. I'll take Condon Terrace, for example, where Grandma Rudd was, Naomi Rudd was raised, my father in that community. The entire community was shut down. Now Berry Farms, where my family was going through, that community is being shut down. And those displaced residents still may or may not have an opportunity to return. We've seen this happen time and time again. Condon Terrace, again, where did everyone left and those residents were not able to come back. But the people who did come back were those who are a part of now our crime base because they've uprooted from their homes and no place to call home. I saw that the Community Land Trust was funded in the last budget cycle, but there's been no public information around how those dollars are being spent. Again, this is for oversight. And so thank you for your time, and I look forward to explaining more.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Mr. Fleming, you're up next, and Ms. Gore will follow you.
Thank you so much. So let's get started. On the issue of affordable housing, DC has the least affordable housing market of any major city, and we lead the nation as it relates to displacement of Black residents. So we have to change what we're doing. And the distinction between myself and the other candidates is I've been working on this issue, delivering results at the council. So as I said in my opening statement, the Housing Production Trust Fund, as Dexter stated, we have grossly misspent the funds. The majority of those funds are supposed to be spent on very low income housing, housing that is for people that earn 30% or 50% of the area median income. But the overwhelming majority of the housing spent during the tenure of Councilmember Bonds has been on 80% AMI housing. So we have right now only 2.7% of our housing stock is affordable for people that earn 30% of AMI. There's only 533 homes in the district that are affordable for people that earn 60% of AMI. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we've done some things about it. I drafted the legislation to expand support for community land trusts in the District of Columbia that keep housing permanently affordable. As Sharice Crawford just noted, that there was millions of dollars placed for the Douglas Community Land Trust in the last budget. I worked to secure that funding. We have to expand social housing where the government not just funds public housing, but funds workforce housing and mixed income housing. But we also have to expand rent control. I introduced, working with the Reclaim Rent Control Coalition, legislation to expand rent control. By right now, rent control only applies to houses and apartment buildings that were built after 1975. If we change that to include housing that was built within the past 15 years, we will increase the affordable housing under rent control by 13,000 units. That's a 17% increase. And we've been working to get those things done at the council. So I think those are the ideas that we need to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Ms. Gore, you're up, and Councilmember Bonds, you will follow.
Thank you. I want to start off by answering this question to make sure that we distinguish a couple areas when we're talking about affordable housing, and that my campaign particularly concentrates on deeply affordable housing and public housing. The other thing I want to kind of address here, some of the candidates have rightfully raised, is the oversight issue. One of the things that is different about me as a candidate is I'm the only candidate and probably the only person, if elected, would be on the council that has an oversight professional background. I've spent 20 plus years as a special agent with HUD and senior management, where I've investigated federal housing programs and I've conducted oversight of federal housing programs across the country. So when I look at our affordable housing and the way we're operating, I'm deeply troubled by the oversight. And someone did say this previously, by the committee, the housing committee. There's a lot of red flags there. We are currently undergoing review by HUD pending by the recovery team. This is not a routine audit. We've had DCOIG give us a great review audit on the Housing Production Trust Fund. We previously had the DC Audit's Office do the same thing. So as someone with a professional oversight background in housing programs, I'm deeply concerned about that. And regardless of what we legislate, regardless of how much money we put into this program, if we do not oversee our housing agencies properly, we will not be meeting the needs of the people. Given that, my model does promote community land trust and social housing, and as well as preserving market rate units that are currently on the market, as well as rent control. So I do think there are a lot of things that we can do to promote affordable housing, but we have to oversee these programs properly to make it work.
Thank you, Ms. Gore. Councilmember Bonds.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for that important question. I think it goes to the root of what we're all most concerned with, and that is how do we increase affordability in housing in the city? I want to start with the Housing Production Trust Fund, which is our primary vehicle for housing in general across the city. The gap financing that fund provides really is spread across many different projects. The projects are selected through an RFP process. And through that process, you also have to consider how you're going to reach the 0 to 30% income bracket. And what we have done of late, just last year, we began a process with the local rent supplement vouchers. And that's how we're now able to increase the number of units that are provided at that income level. The current RFP process yields approximately an increase of about 11.8% of the units will be in that bucket. And that on top of 16%. So we're getting closer, but it's going to take years because we just begun the process of adding the voucher to the program. And what the voucher does, it gives the owner, the developer, the opportunity to have a operating balance that they can use towards discounting the housing. So that is our primary vehicle. Yes, we have something called rent control, but when you talk to people who are in rent control, they will make it.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. All right, candidates, we are going to mix this up just a little bit. Our next 3 questions are coming from DC residents. We've got 3 of them. They are all via video. After the video is complete, it'll come back to you all. You have 1 minute to respond to each of these questions. And we're going to start first with Mr. Williams and then Ms. Jenkins. All right, our first video.
Hi, my name is Langford Wiggins from Ward 7. We've heard a lot about youth-involved crime and safety in DC. What programs and policies are you going to use geared towards youth to reduce violence and improve community safety in DC? Thanks.
Great, hope you guys were able to hear that. Yes, we'll start first with Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Yes, I'm also a resident of Ward 7 and I know Langford, and I appreciate the question. You know, I think one of the things that we really have to look at is, you know, why someone is committing a crime. I know we're talking about root causes, but how do we define what root causes are? You know, for me, root causes are what's going on at home, what's going on at the community, you know, what's going on in your upbringing. I think that we need to have a targeted, comprehensive investment if we're really going to solve crime. One of the things that I think that we should do, and I know this is an idea that's been talked about a lot, is expanding the Summer Youth Employment Program. I participated in the Summer Youth Employment Program when I was younger. You know, it put money in my pocket, it kept me out of trouble, gave me something to do, and it also gave me skill sets. I think we need to make the program robust. I think we need to make it an opportunity where, you know, students and youth have an opportunity to intern at law firms, work on Capitol Hill, similar to what I did when I was at Howard University.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Again, you all have 1 minute. It's just a 1 minute response this time. We'll now go to Ms. Jenkins, and then Mr. Lane, you will follow.
I'd like to thank the resident from Ward 7 that asked that question. I actually live in the historic Deanwood community located in Ward 7. So that's probably one of my really direct neighbors. At any rate, in response to the question, I personally live a very close to nature lifestyle, and I would love to see young folks involved in more holistic, close to nature activities. I live in the greenest ward. I enjoy Marvin Gaye Park, and I think that often when we talk about trauma, we really don't talk about how nature can actually reduce trauma, how its holistic properties help kids navigate holistic remedies like breathology, yoga, centering. I would love to see diverse offerings as diverse as the changing interests as young people. And I would love to see the government agencies talk frequently to collectively on how to create those programs that can change and rotate with the interest of children.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Mr. Lane, and then Mr. Thomas, you'll follow.
Yes, thank you for the question. Let me just be frank. We will never solve the issue of crime until we solve the issue of housing, poverty, and income. We will never solve the issue of crime. And I've been doing, promoting crime and promoting violence as a public health issue for years. Number one, and I'm a Ward 7 resident as well. Number one, if you want to teach a child or teach even an adult how to do math, you've got to teach them math and they have to practice math. The Center for Disease Control recommended years ago that we invest in putting a violence prevention curriculum in our schools starting in middle school, and we have not done that. Those are preventive measures in the long term to prevent crime. There are many other things that we can engage in, but we have to start by preventing crime from the beginning, and that is teaching our children how to be nonviolent and to solve conflict. Until that happens.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Mr. Thomas, you're up next, and Ms. Gore, you will follow.
Sure, thank you, thank you. And with all due respect to my colleague, Mr. Lane, I think working at the level of high school, even middle school, is too late. We need to be addressing our children at the elementary school level. We need to be taking 7 and 8-year-olds and providing them with recreation centers and staffing programs. And we need to equip all our schools with Wi-Fi, with computers, with highly effective teachers. We need to invest in families, and we need to make sure that at that early age, we're putting them with mentors and we're putting them in the right direction. By the time they get to be teenagers, it's almost too late. We're talking about children who have been indoctrinated into a system that, to no fault of their own, is driving them into that school to prison pipeline. It's too late. We got to invest in children at an early age and give them the skills and the equipment they need to succeed. That's how we address the crime problem. It's not going to be addressed at the back end. We got to work on it at the front end.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Ms. Gore, you are up, and Councilmember Bonds, you will follow.
I'd like to thank the resident for this question, and I'm going to answer it as a mom of a 17-year-old boy and also as someone that served in this city as a bilingual probation officer for minority, Black and brown youth. It's never too late. As a mom, as somebody that's worked with kids in the juvenile justice system, we have to stay with them from beginning to end. Particularly, I would invest in a holistic approach. So definitely violence interruption, I think, is really important. Some of the things that we're doing and making progress in that area. And I do agree, holistically, we have to look at how our kids are being treated in school, how they're progressing in school, their home environment, where they live. Some of our kids, most of my kids in juvenile probation lived in public housing. So I actually started going into public housing when I was supervising them. And those conditions make all that experience exacerbate, lead to issues that we need to address immediately.
Thank you, Ms. Gore. Councilmember Bonds, you're up, and Mr. Fleming, and then Ms. Crawford will follow you.
Thank you very much. You know, when we talk about crime today, we're talking about youth crime primarily. We're talking about the violence and the fear of crime. And you should know that I grew up in Ward 7 in the Benning Ridge neighborhood. When I was coming along, we had gangs, we had delinquents, we had all of that. But what we see today is not what we were seeing back in the day, as many refer to it, because we did not have crime or violence, Black on Black violence, where without any provocation, young people attack each other because there is some argument, some disagreement, where they immediately think that picking up a weapon, using a weapon is the way to make a difference.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Mr. Fleming.
Yes, thank you for this question. I'd like to thank the Ward 7 resident for this question. As many of you know, I'm a Ward 7 resident, and I was carjacked at gunpoint by 17, 15-year-olds during the middle of this campaign, which reflects my experience with this issue. And I wasn't reactionary when I asked to call for what we should do to address this issue with young people. I already had a plan because I've been working on these issues at the council. And my plan is 3 parts. 1, expanding the Summer Youth Employment Program to a year-round program. I'm glad Dexter really amplified that message. Also, we have to make sure youth ages 18 through 29, we invest in a program, millions of dollars employment program from them, focusing on infrastructure jobs, community work, and the arts. And finally, I have a vision called Universal After School. We must mandate that every young person in this city has guaranteed access to an after-school opportunity that's high quality and of their choice, because that's going to engage our young people year-round and during the all day, and not just during the school day. And that's what we need for our young people.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Ms. Crawford, you're our final candidate for this question.
Grateful. Thank you for the question. I want to start with saying I am the only candidate that has been successful with reducing violence and our crime. I'm the only candidate that stood in between gang rivals and had been able to call a truce. I'm the only candidate who comes from a family that historically has housed some of the 6,000 current juveniles that are homeless right now in our city. And we want to invest and amplify foster parents. That start right there. They're the foundation, they're the base. We also want to make sure that we are promoting services. I like how Mr. Thomas talked about the need for 7 to 8 year olds. 7 and 8 year olds need economic opportunities. They're looking for ways to sweep the broom, mow the lawns at younger ages. Let's provide that to them. Nutrition equity. I've seen some of the food that we fed our children, and it is similar to what we feed inmates. And that is nothing to make light of, because inmates should not be eating this kind of food. But our young people are malnutrition, and it shows. And so again, I'm the only candidate that's effectively organized youth service providers, and I will continue to do so.
Thank you so much, Ms. Crawford. We're going to move into our second video question now. And then Mr. Fleming will be first in line to respond. Again, 1-minute responses.
Hi, my name is Sarah Shafkat, and I live in Ward 1. I'm an educator, I'm a parent, and I'm one of thousands of immigrants that call the district home. It's budget season, and earlier this evening, Mayor Bowser hosted one of this year's budget forums. What priority items would you want to see in DC's budget, and how would you want to make the budget different than it is now?
Excellent question. One distinction between me, I've worked on 5 budgets at the council. As a committee director, your job, you're the final say-so. And I was the final say-so over the recreation budget, the library budget, Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. So what I want to see in this specific budget, we need to make sure we fully fund birth to 3, to make sure that we find and have access to childcare throughout the city. We need to make sure we're using our surplus funds to make sure that we're preventing evictions, making sure that we're paying for the rents. But we also have to make sure that we're providing investments in education, making investments as it relates to at-risk students. Those are the type of things that I'm very proud of. On the budgets that I worked on, I'm very proud of creating the Ward 7, Ward 8 Dream Grants program. That program has given over $1 million over the past 4 years and grants up to $10,000 only for Ward 7 and 8 residents that have good ideas for entrepreneurship. And those are the type of things that we need to do to leverage the DC budget to create real outcomes for people. And that's what I'll do as your next council.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Ms. Gore, you're up next, and Mr. Williams, you will follow. 1 minute.
Thank you. I think my concentration on the budget would definitely be public housing repairs. That's public housing, and affordable housing is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. You know, I'm a granddaughter of a granddad that lived in Searson Quarter that got displaced and torn down. It's still a vacant parking lot. So I think I would want to concentrate on public housing, getting public housing updated, green retrofits, making it clean, affordable. We hear in the public oversight hearings, testimony after testimony about how deplorable those conditions are. And we just had a question from a Ward 7 resident regarding crime and youth. A lot of our youth live in public housing, and they deserve to live in clean spaces that are healthy and that are conducive to the betterment of their living and their families.
Thank you, Ms. Gore. Mr. Williams, you're up, and Ms. Crawford, you will follow.
Thank you. I used to work at the council, and I have experience dealing with budgets. And I would tell you, one of the priorities I would have is investing in our education. One of the reasons why I got into this race. Right now, we have a system where students of color and students with disabilities are not on reading and math level. And the pandemic has exacerbated that issue. And so I would like to see us make investments to put supports to make sure that there isn't a further decline. And also, like my colleague, Ms. Lisa Gore, public housing is also another big issue of mine. You know, I worked with the Garfield Terrace Resident Council in developing their constitution, and they need a lot of help. And you know, I don't know if anyone's ever been to Garfield Terrace, but the conditions of the facility are terrible. I walked in there one time and you just see roaches all over the building. It's just really sad how we are neglecting residents who live in public housing. So those would be my budget priorities.
Thanks, Mr. Williams. Ms. Crawford, you're up. Councilmember Bonds, you'll follow.
Thank you so much. One of the things I was able to successfully do as advisory neighborhood commissioner was ensure that there was a nutritionist at the Giant and actually making sure that we had food where we lived in a food desert. So nutrition equity will be one. We need 24-hour access to high quality food. People are hungry, and hunger leads to crime. We laugh at hangry, but this is very real. And we do not make the direct consequence to how hungry people are, to what challenges or what measures they will go to feed that need. We've lost it. Next, we must put financial literacy as young as elementary school. We need to connect the Monopoly man to the block and how kids can access opportunities. I met with some of our union members. They are not getting students from our middle schools or high schools to participate in their apprenticeships. We must have vocational education back into our schools. And lastly, there's not one youth literacy program in our high school, and that should be a crime.
Thank you so much, Ms. Crawford. Councilmember Bonds, you're up, and Ms. Jenkins, you'll follow.
Thank you very much again. When we talk about this subject matter, we're really talking about a budget that needs to prioritize our young people. And I think that should be the focus of our budgets. As you may know, every year we add almost another $1 billion to the DC budgets. We're now at $17 billion. And I really think that it's time for us to focus on our young people, and that means young people and their families. I'm one of the creators of the Police Reform Commission. And through that process, we expected to talk a lot about officers and how they treat people. We ended up talking a lot about the needs of our young people. And when we talk about schools, we talk about the needs of our young people. When we talk about families and how we spend money, we're talking about our young people. And so I think we got to wake up. That's where it is. And that's what I think we should be doing, including public housing, of course.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Ms. Jenkins, you're up, and Mr. Lane, you'll follow, and then Mr. Thomas.
Great question. I agree with what a lot was shared today. Public housing is deplorable. I've actually taken tours. I've seen rodent infestations. I've been studying and talking with folks at the EPA about urban rodentologists and basically how that can become exacerbated in the district. I think there needs to be an emphasis on taking care of dilapidated properties. Lots of the real estate that is for public housing is 30 to 40 years old. It's grossly unkept and disgusting. When we talk about those living conditions and the psychological and the hygienic impact, it's really, really gutting that we place families and loved ones there. We don't talk about the rodents that carry E. coli and other diseases and bacteria that also impact businesses like our food industry. We need to reimagine and get creative about the environmental justice issues and the people issues that are very much connected.
Thanks, Ms. Jenkins. Mr. Lane, and then Mr. Thomas.
Yes, thank you. If in 2022, the council hasn't focused on young people by now, when are they actually going to focus on young people? It just baffles my mind that in 2022, we are just now talking about focusing on young people. And this is part of the dilemma that we find ourselves in. I support the expansion of universal basic income. And universal basic income to seniors who are on fixed incomes below the poverty line, universal basic income for students and young people that are working age, universal basic income for those that are underemployed, that are making less than living wage in the district. We have got to begin to lift people out of poverty. Otherwise, we'll be back here in 2 years talking about the same old issues, the same old way. And so we have to stop that. We have to end that cycle of incrementalism and actually solve problems.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Mr. Thomas.
Yes, I have to agree with Mr. Lane and with Councilmember Bonds on this one. I think we need to prioritize our young people. When I was volunteering back in 2020, registering people to vote in the Congress Heights neighborhood, I saw a mother with 3 small children sitting outside of a building with their devices because they had no Wi-Fi in their homes. We need to make sure we have Wi-Fi in all our neighborhoods. We need to modernize our schools, make sure they have all children have computers and access to computers, and we need to make sure that we have highly effective teachers and administrators in all of our schools. We have to fix this at that level so that we don't just keep perpetuating the problems from generation to generation. That's where I would prioritize. And also put money into housing, as everyone else has said, and into the oversight of our first source law so that we make sure that we're getting a greater share of employment for our people. But number one would be putting the money into youth programs, rec centers, and so forth.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. All right, candidates, we're on our final video question. Again, 1 minute response. We're going to start first with Ms. Crawford this time.
Good evening. My name is Sharice Muhammad. I am a parent, business owner, and resident of Ward 7. This question is for each of our at-large council member candidates. Now that the Washington football team has a new name, the Washington Commanders, there is debate about whether to lure them back to the District of Columbia with a new stadium on the former RFK Stadium site, or to use that land for affordable housing and other community needs. What do you think we should do with the site, and why?
Ms. Crawford, you're up. 1 minute.
Yeah, the subject matter of the homeless and unhoused neighbor chills my bones. I've seen too many families on the streets, too many families facing eviction my entire life. If it ever came down to the human needs of displaced residents versus entertainment, I will always go with the ethical approach, and that is making sure that we have housing, secure housing, stable housing, long-term housing for our unhoused residents. So that would absolutely be a housing choice for me. I recognize the need for wanting to bring the revenue into our town, which is something that's critically important to enhance our city's budget flow and cash flow. And we'll have to simply negotiate agreements with our surrounding community members to do so. I think we can negotiate a fair percentage with Virginia and or Maryland, regardless of where they go, and we can win the upper hand both ways.
Thank you for that, Ms. Crawford. Mr. Thomas, you're up next, and Mr. Lane, you'll follow.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm a diehard fan of the Washington football team and all of our local sports teams. But I mean, if the choice is between building a stadium and building housing for people in need, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Of course, we're going to opt to build the housing, to put the infrastructure in for people's needs, and not an entertainment venue. Now, if we can work it in a way that we can create an entertainment venue that actually brings revenue and builds housing around it or whatever, fine, we can work that out. But if it's a question between one or the other, I don't have to think about that. Obviously, we're going to go with the housing and not the entertainment venue. And I don't need a minute to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Lane, you're up, and Councilmember Bonds, you'll follow.
Yes, thank you. There is virtually no evidence of any stadium in the United States of America benefiting the surrounding community in which it is built. None. And there are studies that show this. So unless there's going to be a plan to be able to show how it will financially, aesthetically, income-wise benefit the surrounding community, I would not vote for it unless it showed that. I just showed you and talked to you about the lack of income growth in Ward 7 and Ward 8. RFK has been a part of Ward 7. The lack of income growth for families with children in Ward 7 and in Ward 8. We've had stadiums. They haven't done a daggone thing.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Councilmember Bonds, you are up, and Ms. Gore, you'll follow.
Thank you very much. Again, if the issue is, should we have a stadium on the old RFK grounds and also have housing, then I can support those two objectives. As you probably know, we're talking about more than 30 acres, and there is enough space to have both. Now, why is the stadium important? If you look at the, well, let's look at National Stadium. And National Stadium brings in revenue. It brings in revenue in a variety of ways, sales tax, and let's hope that whatever we put at the old site, that it will also do that. But housing is important, but we really need to have a citywide housing plan so that we know where and what we can do as it relates to housing.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Ms. Gore, you are up, and Mr. Williams, you'll follow.
Yep. Well, I thank the resident for bringing up this question. Personally, I would put people over profit in this situation, and I would use this for housing. I would use this for green space for kids. Our kids in DC do not have enough playing fields. There's all kinds of things that we could put on that RFK site that benefit the community, whether it's housing, whether it's fields, play spaces. We can use our imagination, but I would absolutely use it to the benefit of the community. I do agree. One of the candidates mentioned, I guess, issues surrounding community engagement. I think that is very important. This is public land, and the public should have a say-so in how it's used. So my vision is for families and youth and kids, but the public needs to weigh in on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gore. Mr. Williams, you're up, and then Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you. I agree with what with all my colleagues are saying. This is, using a Bradley Thomas term, a no-brainer. If it's between housing and mixed-use development and the Washington Commanders, I'm going to go with public housing. I'm sorry, I'm going to go with housing.
Thank you for that, Mr. Williams. Ms. Jenkins, and then Mr. Fleming.
Again, I'm definitely a people-centered type of candidate, a people over politics, a people over popularity. So I would definitely listen to the community, but I feel just based off of listening and hosting several listening sessions that are community focused, that a lot of folks would affirm my decision to publicly say, definitely a community-centered space, rather that's play areas or dog parks or housing. I definitely would listen to the community and reimagine that space to a space that complements the interests, that I've listened, that I was thoughtful, that I was meditative, and it reflect all the voices of all 8 wards and the folks that participated in that conversation. So I definitely would execute my vote, my oversight, and my intelligence in that area.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Mr. Fleming.
Thank you so much. So I've been having conversations with thousands of Washingtonians at their doors, and I've actually knocked the neighborhood near RFK Stadium. And there was a resident that asked me this direct question, and I assured him that we will be working to build housing on the site. But this is a good example of what we need, how we can be creative as Washingtonians, as a district government on sites like this. Far too often in the past, we have put profit over people and sold these sites to developers for $1. So we need to do things like do deeply affordable housing on this site. We can make this site an innovation hub where we do employer-led job training, where we have incubators there to promote job growth. We can bring the University of the District of Columbia across the river to expand higher education access. We need to expand urgent healthcare east of the river. Those are the type of things that we need to do on this site. We also can think about opportunities for people like firefighters, our teachers, our police to live, work, and play in our communities.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. All right, candidates, it's time for the lightning round. So this is how this is going to work. I'll read a question. You will put your thumb up if you agree, down if you do not, and I ask that you hold your thumb up or thumbs down for about 15 seconds, okay? All right. Let's get started. Almost 43,000 households report being behind in rent, and Mayor Bowser has so far refused to use our budget reserves for additional rental assistance. This budget season, the DC Council will have the opportunity to help desperate DC renters. If given the chance, would you fully support, so you're gonna have a choice here. And so you'll do thumbs up or thumbs down for each one I read, okay? So the first one, fully funding eviction prevention programs to keep families. Yeah,
Kim, where is my thumbs up button? I only see a raised hand.
you're gonna use your
On my
physical
own.
hand.
Okay, not the Zoom thumbs up.
No
Thank you
Zoom
very
hands.
much.
I want your
All right.
thumbs either up or down. All right. So I'll read the first one. So let me start over. 43,000 households report being behind on rent. Mayor Bowser has yet to use the budget reserves for rental assistance. This budget season, the mayor and the council have the opportunity to keep renters in their homes. So if given the chance, would you support fully funding eviction prevention programs to keep families in their home? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Hold it. If you can hold it, please. Ambrose, yours up. Okay, great. Second part, immediately passing us, or would you support immediately passing a supplemental budget to get the funds out the door as soon as possible? So sorry, not an and or an or, but thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you support immediately passing a supplemental budget to get the funds out the door as soon as possible? Thumbs up or thumbs down and hold. Thank you very much. All right, now that everybody's warmed up, ready for the second question?
Are they all two parts?
No, actually, that was the only one. So
Okay.
it gets easier. Most Washingtonians believe taxation without representation is immoral. Yet permanent residents who live in the district and pay the same taxes as citizens who don't have, who live in DC and pay the same taxes as citizens do not have the right to vote. Ward 1 Councilmember Brianne Nadeau has introduced a bill to grant permanent residents voting rights in our local district elections. Do you support this bill? Thumbs up if you support Brianne Nadeau's bill, thumbs down if you do not, and hold, please. Thank you very much. Our next question. The report of the DC Police Reform Commission recommended removing civil traffic enforcement responsibilities from MPD and then transferring those duties to DDOT. Do you support removing the police from the civil traffic enforcement? Thumbs up if you agree, thumbs down if you don't support it. Let's see those thumbs. Thank you very much. Next lightning round question. We've got 3 more to go. Mayor Bowser just ended the district's vaccine mandate for restaurants and businesses, but council members are considering emergency legislation to reinstate it. Would you vote to reinstate the district's vaccine mandate or proof of vaccines? Thumbs up if you do, thumbs down if you do not, if you would vote to reinstate it. Hold. Thank you very much. Earlier this year, at-large council member Christina Henderson introduced the VOICE Act to allow DC voters to rank their vote. If you were on the DC Council today, would you vote for the VOICE Act? Thumbs up if you would vote for the VOICE Act. Thumbs down if you would not vote for the VOICE Act. And hold. Ambrose has got a hand, a middle of the way hand. Okay. Thank you very much. Our final lightning round question. Earlier this year, the DC Council passed a bill to raise taxes on some of our highest earners in order to fund housing vouchers for homeless residents, higher pay for our childcare workers, and monthly stipends for our lower income families. Do you think the district can do more on tax equity, or do you think we're doing enough at this time? So thumbs up if you think we can do more and should do more, and thumbs down if you think we're doing enough. Thumbs up if you think we can do more, thumbs down if you think we're doing enough. Hold. Thank you very much. We made it through the lightning round. Thank you all so much. And guess what? We have 2 more questions from DC residents. And so we will go to video when we come back. Your responses for these will be 1 minute. And we will start first with Ms. Gore.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Nicole Johnson, and I am the ANC Commissioner for ANC 4B06. My question is that Councilmember Louis George, as well as Councilmember Che, have all introduced legislation that would give the State Superintendent of Education more autonomy separate from the mayor's office. Do you or do you not agree with this approach, and why?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, I can repeat the question for you. Councilmember Louis George and Councilmember Che have introduced a bill to make the office of the State Superintendent of Education more independent of the mayor. What aspects of these bills do you agree or disagree with? Sound good? And we'll start first with Ms. Gore, and then Mr. Fleming will follow.
All right. Well, I would like to thank Commissioner Tiffany for that question. I know her and her work over there in 4B. I do support the legislation to give OSSI more independence from mayor control. I personally do not support mayor control at this time, and I think that OSSI and our schools should have a lot more transparency and independence on our school issues. I don't know the specifics of each legislation, but I do support that effort. I also support increasing more transparency for parents and their involvement in the process. I know both educators and parents have spoken a lot on this issue, and it's something that I think we need to move forward to. And I definitely do support it. I would love to see this happen.
Thank you, Ms. Gore. Just a reminder to all the candidates, you have 1 minute for a response. The timer is on. Mr. Fleming, you are up next, and Mr. Williams, you'll follow.
Yes, I would support the legislation. I think we need more autonomy, more independence. Working at the council, you'll get very frustrated because people that work for the mayor will never admit to the mayor doing anything wrong. And when it comes to education, where we have the highest achievement gap between Black and white students in the country, where we have such low performance levels when it comes to reading for Black male students, We need someone that's going to be able to call and speak the truth. And right now, the superintendent of education is not able to do that. I think we should also expand the powers of the State Board of Education. And at the end of the day, education is my most important issue. Education is what took me from a single parent household in the 80s in Southeast to Morehouse College, to become a lawyer studying at Berkeley Law, to earn a full scholarship at Harvard Kennedy School. And I believed in using my education to create equity and opportunity in the district. And that's what I'll do as your next council member.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Mr. Williams, you're up. Councilmember Bonds, you will follow. Mr. Williams?
Thank you. Yes, I truly support this effort. I mean, you know, my mom is a retired DCPS teacher, so I grew up on all the stories that was wrong with the DC public school system. You know, one of the reasons why we switched to mayoral control is because we used to have transparency issues, there's an accountability issues, there's an achievement gap issue, and we still have the same issue today, 10 to 15 years later. So I fully support this, and I hope that we pass this legislation quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Councilmember Bonds, you're up. 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Yes, I support the legislation. I believe that OSSE needs to be an independent agency because I think their role is to set the educational standards, not just for public school, but also for our charter schools. It is our state institution for deciding how we want education to flow in our city. And I think independence is required to do that.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Let's see. Mr. Thomas, you're up next, and Ms. Crawford, you will follow.
Okay, thank you. I love this question. I mean, I agree totally that the superintendent should be independent. In fact, I'd go a step further. I think that the super should be selected by an elected school board, and that elected school board should be composed of individuals with experience as educators or school administrators who are dedicated to education. People should not be able to run for the school board to use it as a stepping stone for higher education. I think we should have a school board that's dedicated for that purpose, and that board should hire the superintendent, who would then be independent and be able to run the schools in an effective manner. Absolutely, it should not be under the control of the mayor. I think that's a big mistake, and I think we're going down the wrong path with that. So yes, I do agree with the legislation, only I'd take it that step further.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Ms. Crawford, you're up. Mr. Lane, you'll follow.
Thank you, always at the time. Yes, I, as a product of DC Public and DC Charter School, I attended 10 different schools before graduating from Ballou Senior High School and then on to the historic Shaw University. And I will say we must absolutely and urgently end mayoral controlled school boards. Everything that worked in our schools was removed. That economically disenfranchised us and put us further back than we started. I will also say, I'll take it a step further than Mr. Bradley. It needs to be a ballot measure. We need to vote on our school board intendant the way we vote on every other leadership body in our town. We vote on the ward representatives and the at-large member. And I'll end with this. I heard someone say the closer that the academia gets away from the student, the more they earn. That in itself is criminal. Our educators and substitute teachers are deeply underfunded, and it shows where our values are. So again, thank you, Shaw University, and thank you, Ballou Senior High School.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Mr. Lane, and then finally, Ms. Jenkins.
Yes, I support the legislation, but we need to do so much more. We actually need a complete revision of our school governance structure. The mayoral control was an experiment. We need to get rid of that experiment. We actually need to elect our state superintendents citywide, as is done in other states in the country. We need to reflect a democratic model that is reflected in the states, not a city model, which is what we have now. In states, they elect the state superintendent, and the school board should be given the authority to create policy as well as implement policy. There are many other things that we need to do as well, but we need a reform in a more democratic way so that parents can actually get involved in the process of educating our children by getting involved in ward-based education plans that are run by and created by the ward state board representatives that can be put into a master plan, and then we have real parental meaningful input into the education of our children in our wards.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Ms. Jenkins.
Yes, so I just want to echo what everyone said. I totally agree that the mayor needs to be removed from influencing the public education space. As someone that is a full-time preschool teacher and has 5 nieces and nephews navigating the public education system, I've seen the trauma that it's caused. I've lacked transparency. I've lacked being able to participate in very intimate and personal ways that have influenced their learning experience. I think that we need clear data, a clear matrix on how decisions are being made. I think that we should be able to elect who is representing our education system and who is influencing what our children are learning. And I think that right now it's being grossly mishandled. We definitely need a state model. So I definitely support this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Candidates, we're going to move on to our final video question. When the video is complete, we'll return. Mr. Thomas will start first this time, and it will be a 1-minute response. So 1 minute on the clock, and after Mr. Thomas, Councilmember Bonds will follow. So next video question.
I'm Marcus Batchelor, and I'm from Ward 8. In response to growing poverty and deepening inequality, the idea of a guaranteed income and direct payment programs have gained traction in cities across the country, including DC, where several nonprofits and even the district government are running small pilot programs to assist residents in need. What are your ideas and thoughts about expanding and doubling down on the idea of a guaranteed income and direct payment programs to close what are some of the largest wealth and income gaps in the country here in Washington, D.C.?
Mr. Thomas.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'm not convinced that a guaranteed income helps us significantly. I think what we need is guaranteed education, guaranteed training. We need to prepare our people for the opportunities and the jobs of the future so that they can earn. I mean, you can give a person a certain amount of money and it'll carry them over temporarily, but it doesn't get them out of that situation. And as inflation continues and as cost of living grows, they wind up still behind the 8 ball, and they don't develop any sense of accomplishment or any ability to really get ahead of the curve. So I think it's fine to use some stopgap measures to provide some income temporarily and so forth. But the big thing is to put our people in position to win. That's what we have to focus on. And that's where I stand on that. Now I have to see the details of the program. Maybe there's something we can work with there, but overall, we got to put our people in position to win.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Councilmember Bonds, and then Mr. Fleming, you'll follow.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again. This is a very important proposition. And I want to thank Mr. Batchelor for it because it's something that we really should consider. And we should consider the fact that if we're really going to take extremely low income families out of poverty, we will have to give them some money. And so I'm all in for it. I think there's a way to do it. And the way to do it is to make sure that those that are at the lower end of our income strata have the opportunity to rise up. I think that may include our seniors as well as our young families. I think that's a good proposition. We proposed it here at the council a few years ago. Councilmember Grasso and I was supportive of it then, and I'm still supportive of that proposition.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Mr. Fleming, you're up. Mr. Williams, you'll follow.
Thanks for asking that question, Marcus. If you guys don't know, Marcus was my first mentee. I was working with him when he was 16 years old, and then he became vice president of the State Board of Education. So I definitely support guaranteed income programs. We're doing a lot of pilots here in DC. I don't know if everyone's familiar, like the DC Flex program, which puts money in people's pockets for rental payments, the DC Cares program that we've done following COVID-19. There's a new program that's putting dollars in the pockets of expecting and new mothers that are low income. and Kenya McDuffie passed the baby bonds legislation that for certain low income families, they'll receive about $1,000 each year for that child until they get 18. They can use that money to start a business or to go to college. So those are the programs that we need to expand. And I definitely would like to do that as a member of the District of Columbia Council, particularly as it relates to housing. There's so many people that need an additional 300 or 400 to meet their housing costs. I think those are the type of ideas that we need.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Mr. Williams, you're up, and Ms. Crawford, you'll follow.
Thank you. I think it's a great concept. I'm fully supportive of it. We've seen, as my colleagues mentioned, a lot of these pilot cash assistance programs are very successful. And when you talk to people who participate in these programs, they talk about how it's changed their lives. They've been able to pay their bills. It's just changed their lives. And so I'm very supportive of it. I think it needs to be multi-pronged. I think we need to include educational training and job training, to close the gap. But I'm very supportive of this program.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Crawford, and then Ms. Jenkins.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marcus, for that question. My colleague, I want to make sure that we focus on expanding the guaranteed income, but also reducing the startup fees, reducing and or eliminating the business startup fees based on your income. We want to make sure that not only do we have support for your new mortgage, but we're able to significantly cut the cost for your down payment of your new rental unit. We need special class designation for those applying for any position in the District of Columbia. Immediate, again, food access. Life insurance should not be reserved based on your zip code. We want to make sure that the guaranteed income can cover actual bills, senior living and rehabilitation costs. Most of my seniors simply want upgrades to their homes. We can put the funds there. We can put the funds to make sure that those ready to go back into the workforce has their attire to do so. We have a huge population that's going into the disability community that's not able to qualify for disability. Then funds can go there. Reducing and eliminating transportation. Let's put the money right there. And again, college debt elimination. No student should return home with college debt. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Ms. Jenkins, and then Ms. Gore and Mr. Lane.
This was a really great question, and I'm really excited by the concept. I think that a universal basic income would give people the financial wiggle room to save and to invest and to potentially close the wealth gap. But I'm also having a bit of concerns because it is a pilot. A lot of the studies and the examples have not been applicable to the United States, although they've been done abroad. So we have to consider lots of other variables like population size, socialization, and also education about wealth and wealth management. And how do we educate people about investing and compounding interest and residual income and all of those things that create paths that are really strong and really clear to equity. So I'm on board with the concept, but I think we need to continue to use pilots and broach it with caution while educating folks on how to create pathways to equity and wealth so that when we give stimulus or if we give a UBI, that people are able to invest in the spirit of the legislation.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Ms. Gore.
Yes, I definitely support UBI, and it is becoming more popular across the states. And even here, we have a candidate for the congressional race that is an expert on UBI. But, I just think about it from the perspective of a mom. When I was raising my son, even when I was just here on my own living in DC trying to keep up with rent, having the extra income is a lifesaver. I mean, that could prevent somebody from, buying medicine to not buying medicine, buying food, not having food, being homeless or not being homeless. So I think that a little bit of extra income gives people a boost, a financial boost that's really needed at this time, particularly with COVID and how things have been exacerbated and the wealth gap that we see just from, the pandemic, which we also had prior to the pandemic. But sorry, my went off.
Ms. Gore, was that your line? Oh, okay. All right. I think you got most of what you were saying in there. Mr. Lane, you're okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Lane, 1 minute before we move to the final question.
Yes, thank you, Marcus, for the question. And I just want to point out that on this call, nobody mentioned universal basic income until Marcus's call, but I did mention universal basic income. I don't see it as a program. I see it as a system. I see it as a system to begin to lift people out of poverty, starting with seniors that are on fixed incomes. I was at Edgewood Terrace last night, and about 2 weeks ago, I was at Garfield Terrace talking to seniors. They are desperate. Some of them are living way below the poverty line, and $1,000 a month would be able to help them pay for medicines, pay for food, and not so much rent, but they're busy paying rent and can't pay for medicines and food. We need universal basic income because we can lift DC out of poverty in about 12 years. It is not the answer. It is only the beginning of the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. So we are now at our final question. I'm going to pose the question. Each of you will have 1 minute to respond. Mr. Lane, we're going to begin with you first. Ms. Crawford, you will follow. Our question is, we're in a rising crisis of opioid addiction with Black residents. Oops. Oh, okay, sorry about that. I didn't know.
You're right about that.
Yes. So we're in a rising crisis of opioid addiction with Black residents accounting for 84% of overdose fatalities. And that is just in the last 6 years here in the district. Meanwhile, drug treatment is difficult to access. DC has only one 24-hour treatment center, and it's located in Ward 3. What are your views on treating substance use disorders and the broader question of the criminalization of drug use? Again, 1 minute responses. We'll begin with Mr. Lane, and Ms. Crawford, you'll follow.
Well, as a health advocate, this is the work that I do, and I'm working even while I'm campaigning. So what I've done very recently, I formed what's called the Opioid Solutions Working Group. It is made up of recovery specialists, recovery coaches. It's made up of physicians. It's made up of those that are in the pharmacy space. And we came up with a resolution that we have now shopped to 10 advisory neighborhood commissions in Ward 7, Ward 8, Ward 4, Ward 5, Ward 1. And we have gotten results. As a matter of fact, 2 commissions have already voted to adopt the resolution that we asked for, which is calling for a number of different things. It's calling for a treatment center that's 24-hour and in bed to be financed and placed east of the river, where the majority of the opioid problem is. Opioid deaths have more than doubled the number of homicides. We've had 198 homicides in 2020. We have 411 opioid deaths. This is work that I'm continuing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Ms. Crawford, you're up next, and then Mr. Thomas.
Absolutely. I believe recovery is every single day. I come from a family of caregivers working in the disability community and the health community, and we designed a 12-month curriculum working with many of our mental health programs in the District of Columbia. So recovery is one. There's also a lawsuit that the Attorney General filed. Again, I believe in oversight and following the dollars. Those dollars need to be recirculated back into the community. Since the announcement, we have not heard much from those funds and resources. I think we need to go back to also, when do our children and young people get first exposed to addictions? And I think what's common that we see and we do not talk about enough are the misdiagnosis and improper diagnosis of those in the medical field, where people are getting access to the drugs inappropriately. And so we have to give oversight over our medical institutions as well. Following the dollars, proper oversight on where those dollars go to, and the 12-month Recovery Capital Initiative, because recovery is every single day. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Mr. Thomas, you're up, and Mr. Fleming, you'll follow.
Yeah, I totally agree with developing more treatment centers. You know, earlier on in my career, I used to represent indigent defendants, and 90% of them were addicted to some kind of drug. It's a very serious problem. It has not gotten any better. I'm a fourth generation native Washingtonian. My favorite uncle, who was a third generation Washingtonian, was a heroin addict all of his life. And he died relatively young at, I believe, age 62. They found him in an abandoned building, dead. So this is something that's very personal to me. I think we definitely have to do that. We have to build centers. We have to staff centers, because addiction is a serious concern. It hasn't gone away. It's not getting better. We need to address it. We need to address it now.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Fleming, and then Mr. Williams.
This is a serious problem impacting real people. I work for the Ward 8 council member, and there's been several deaths of young people in our city from opioid abuse. I remember Cairo Skylar Walker's daughter, who's an activist in our city, died over the past 2 years of opioid death. So we need to expand community outreach. We need to make sure that these programs are not just available on the macro level, but available on our blocks, on our streets, in our alleys. We need to expand community use of Narcan. We know that when people use Narcan, they can prevent these opioid deaths. But at the end of the day, we have to deal with drug abuse as a systemic societal problem that requires all hands on deck for us to achieve that. And currently, right now, the healthcare system east of the river is just currently lacking so much. So we have to expand all of the healthcare east of the river, including drug prevention.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Mr. Williams, you're up. Councilmember Bonds, you'll follow.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is an important issue, and it's an issue that doesn't get enough attention. This is about inequities. This is a racial issue. You know, the population that's really been impacted by this are older individuals, particularly older Black men, and they don't have access to opioid addiction treatment as white individuals in our city. And so I think that as a city, we need to make sure that African Americans are getting the access to healthcare that they need. You know, I've had family members who overdose on drugs, and so I know how important this is. And I just think that we need to be more intentional about making sure and being serious that people have access to the actual drugs that targets the opioid addiction, and not the drugs that doesn't work effectively.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Councilmember Bonds, you're up. Ms. Jenkins, you'll follow. Did we lose Councilmember Bonds? Let's go to Ms. Jenkins and then Ms. Gore.
Yes, this is a very important conversation that we're starting. And I think it's a conversation that we need to have a whole lot more. I think that we need to be very intentional about creating more treatment centers throughout all 8 wards. This isn't an isolated situation. This isn't an isolated emergency. This is an emergency that's impacting all 8 wards, and treatment needs to be available. I think that we need to also support recovery. As someone that has lived with someone and has family members that have battled addiction, even when they are in recovery, every day is a choice not to relapse and not to use. And I think that we also need to support people in their journey to stay healthy and drug-free. I think that we need to give consideration to programs in schools similar to DARE that provide education about drug use, addictive properties, and how traumatic it can be in hampering quality of life. I think we need an all hands on deck approach in order to get a grip on this crisis.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. If we don't have the council member, let's go ahead and wrap this question before closing statements with Ms. Gore.
Thank you. This is a question that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I started out as a certified addiction counselor, drug abuse counselor. So we definitely need more treatment centers. It's disappointing to hear the one that we have is in Ward 3. We need them throughout the city. Drug addiction is a medical issue, and we need to treat it as such. And we need to staff it and make sure that we are able to address it amongst all of our people, including our young people, which definitely experience drug dependency as well. One of the things one of the candidates talked about, which is definitely an oversight issue. I believe there was a recent issue with our residents at DC Jail not being provided their drug treatment and their drug counseling. So it's all across the board an issue and something that we need to address. So I definitely agree that we should do as much as we can to solve this issue.
Thank you very much. All right, okay. I think I saw a note about Councilmember Bonds. I just wanted to give her a minute. Good. I think we should move on. Well, we have come to the time in our program where we're going to have you all do some closing statements. We so appreciate just your diligence and staying strong with us through all the many different questions. Hopefully we mixed it up for you a little bit there to make it interesting. But certainly your responses and answers have given all of our participants and attendees tonight a lot to think about. And they are interested in hearing, having heard all of your positions. So let's start with closing statements. Each of you will have 2 minutes on the clock for your closing statements. We will start first with Ms. Jenkins, and then Mr. Williams, you'll follow.
Good evening, everyone. I had an incredible time being here tonight. I hope that you were able to see a bit of my heart for people, a bit of my heart for community, and most importantly, a heart for each and every member in the ward. I have lots of experience working in the community, not just at a domestic level, but international as well. I encourage all of you to go to my website, www.jenkins4dc.com. There's an interactive feature there. If you're interested in learning more about me or any platform issue, you can ask a question and get a direct answer in real time. I know that 1 minute is not enough time to actually hear the issues, to dig deep, and to really get a deep knowing of me and my heart for the community. So I'm inviting each and every one of you in to do that. I want you guys to know me and know that when I'm at the table, I'm bringing everyone with me. I want to make sure that you know that I believe in people-centered, people-focused legislation. I have a heart for people, I have a heart for families, and that's what's going to be reflected in the legislation, the interest of each and every one of you. So go to my website, learn more about me, get involved, get excited, and make sure that you volunteer and sign up to participate in the campaign. Thank you, and I enjoyed tonight's conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Mr. Williams, and then Mr. Lane.
Thank you. I want to thank DC for Democracy again, and also want to thank the audience and my colleagues. I thought that this was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed it. One of the reasons I got into this race is because I'm a DC native. I care very much about the city, and I think that we're at a crossroads. When it comes to housing, when it comes to our education system, when it comes to public safety, we have a very important decision to make, and we have to decide what type of city we want to be. Do we want to be the type of city that's going to make sure that everyone has a stable place to live and sleep at night, an education system where all of our students, regardless of where they live, is getting the education that they deserve so that they can succeed? And when it comes to public safety, we need to reimagine that. We need to be thoughtful, we need to be comprehensive, and we need to target root causes in a way that is not harming our young people by over-incarcerating them, but actually making sure they have what they need so they can be successful in life. That is what my campaign is about. That is what I want to do. So I'm asking you to join our movement, join what we're trying to do. Go to our website at dexterfordc.com. That's the number 4, not 4OR, and check us out. And I appreciate everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Lane, you are up, and Ms. Crawford will follow.
Thank you to DC for Democracy for having this. This is such an important forum. And I just wanted to say I enjoyed myself and I enjoyed the conversation with my colleagues that are on this call. My name is Ambrose Lane Jr., and I am not trying to be your politician. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to be the anti-politician. We've already had politicians. We have not solved not one thing. We haven't solved health issues. We haven't solved transportation. We haven't solved housing. We haven't solved poverty. None of the social determinants have we solved. So I'm not trying to come here and sit here and just try to address issues. I'm trying to solve problems. That is why I'm running. It is the only reason that I am running, to solve problems. We can end poverty in the District of Columbia in about 12 years. If we put our minds to it and put the budget accordingly, we can solve the issue of poverty. And if anyone thinks that we can solve public safety and crime without solving income issues and poverty issues and housing issues, they are just walking down the wrong path because it will never happen. And we'll be here again in another 2 years or another 4 years talking about the same things over and over and over. I am not trying to be that guy. I am not trying to be that politician. I'm trying to be the anti-politician. So you can certainly vote for me. You can support my cause and my campaign because I am trying to change this game. I am trying to change what it is we keep talking about over and over and over again. A child that grows up in hunger is 3 times more likely to commit an act of violence. But we are not talking about solving hunger. We are not talking about solving the issues that people are faced with every single day. And we have got to get past this political speak. We have got to get past this mess. And we have got to elect candidates who are true to the game, who are true progressives like I am. And some of the ones that are even on this call are true progressives. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Ms. Crawford, you're up, followed by Ms. Gore.
Yes, thank you so much for this incredible opportunity and this amazing panel. For those who are just joining, my name is Sharice Crawford. I am a proud third-generation Native Washingtonian, current elected at-large committee member to the DC Democratic Party. And I am honored to be your transformational candidate for DC Council at large. Again, I am the only candidate on this panel who has successfully reduced crime since 2004, when we started our advocacy. I'm the only candidate that's been able to go into communities that many of the candidates here will not go and cannot go to stop the violence in our neighborhoods. I'm the only candidate on this panel that's been able to get a unanimous resolution for HR 40 for the repairs and harm done to the African-American descendants in our country. That is over a 100 board member body. And I thank all of my colleagues who helped us achieve that. I'm the only candidate that's focused on our nutrition equity and the right to know the differences and have high quality foods and not fake GMO foods that we have been that we've been pushed out and forced onto us. And that is a part of our environmental justice program. Again, I'm the only candidate that's focused on bridging the gap between multi-generational down to my nephew, my great nephew that wants to wobble on up to my grandparents who want to age and stay in place. And yes, I recruit and adopt grandparents. I've biked from Southeast to Northwest, all up and down our hills. I understand our transportation and infrastructure challenges. I know what we're dealing with every single day with the economic and digital divide, bringing Wi-Fi and access to our families and communities. Again, I'm the only candidate that's ever organized the youth services providers that we have in our town. And there are over 100 that are underfunded and the city has not seen. And so I'm happy to be your transformational candidate. Visit crawfordatlarge.com. Let's get to work.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Ms. Gore, and then Mr. Thomas, and then Mr. Fleming.
Thank you all. I just want to thank everyone on the panel. We've had some amazing candidates that offered a lot of advice and a lot of suggestions for their vision for DC. I want to also take the time to thank DC for Democracy for holding this panel. It's been outstanding, and thank you for giving the at-large candidates an opportunity to speak. My name is Lisa Gore. Just to remind everyone, I am a mom. I'm a mother of a son that goes to DC public schools. I'm a retired federal law enforcement officer. I spent my whole career providing public service to the community, in particular to communities in public housing. So I've had oversight experience all across the country, Puerto Rico, everywhere, southern states, west states, Midwest, providing oversight of housing programs. And I'm excited to bring this experience to the council. I am looking forward to serving you guys, and I am going to actively work for your vote. My candidate or campaign is about a just DC, which means it's about you, and it's about the most vulnerable cities and communities in this city. I definitely want to hear from you all, so please visit my website at Gore4DC, and that's GOREFORDC.com, and I would love to hear from you and work with you on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gore. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you. I want to thank DC for Democracy for holding this forum tonight. And I want to thank all of you who've invested your time to be here to listen. You know, my core beliefs are simple. I believe in the right of the people to be safe, healthy, and heard by their elected representatives. I believe that a leader should act on principles that are unwavering and not for sale at any price. And I believe that progress means striving to bring equity to all of our neighborhoods in terms of access to quality education, affordable housing, employment opportunities, public safety, and environmental justice. You know, as I conclude, I'm thinking about my father, Ashton Thomas, who was the first African-American to work as a supervisor at the White House mailroom. His story was very similar to that of the butler, the character played by Forrest Whitaker in the movie of the same name. I didn't really understand what a historic groundbreaker my dad was until he was gone. And my then 90-year-old mother told me about his promotion and how it was the result of President Kennedy's commitment to bring diversity and equity to the federal workforce. What I did know was that he was hardworking, but humble. He told me that he didn't care about getting accolades from men in this earthly realm. He wanted to serve God and the greater good. And what he passed along to me was his understanding that service is the rent we pay for our space in this life. I'm Bradley Thomas, and I'm asking for your vote to allow me to serve you as your next DC Council member at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, everybody, for participating in this debate. Thank you, DC for Democracy, for holding this debate. I believe that we're in an unprecedented time in the history of the District of Columbia. We're rebounding from the COVID-19 pandemic. We're experiencing a historic moment as it relates to racial justice. And it demands leadership and us as a community to come together to try to fix the systems that were not working for thousands of DC residents before the pandemic. And the pandemic has only exacerbated the disparities in the city, disparities that lead us to having the highest achievement gap between Black and white students in the country, having the highest level of Black displacement over the past decade. And we have to reverse these inequities. And what we need is dedicated leadership that has experience in getting things done. And I'm that leader. I've worked with DC for Democracy over the past 12 years. First as DC's shadow representative to Congress, working to expand support for DC statehood and revitalize that movement. I ran for this position in 2014, and I was honored to receive the support of DC for Democracy with over 90% of the vote against the current incumbent, Anita Bonds. We have a lot of candidates here today, but I'm the only candidate that has run in this race. I'm the only candidate that DC for Democracy has endorsed. And I want to continue doing the work that we know needs to be done to make this a city that works for everyone. The District of Columbia, we have tons of assets, both physical, both human and financial, but we have to leverage those assets to get the outcomes that we deserve. And we need leadership that's focused on putting people over profit and getting results and delivering for the people of DC. And I think that I can do that as your next at-large council member. I hope to earn your endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. We have come to the end of our program, but we're not done just yet. I first want to thank all of you as candidates. Thank you for your courage to run. Thank you for joining us this evening and sharing your vision, your leadership vision for the District of Columbia, this place we all love so very much. And as most of you said, this is a really important election. To all of our attendees, thank you so much for the lively discussion in the chat. We've all been watching and following. It got kind of colorful there for a minute. So we thank you all for just being so incredibly engaged tonight. And then finally, to DC for Democracy, I certainly want to thank you for inviting me again to moderate this important discussion, but also thank you so much for the diligence, time that you all put into making this really an effective forum for all of our residents. So with that, I will turn it back over to Alex.
Well, I think we can all say a big thank you to Kimberly for being an incredible moderator. I appreciate the comment in the chat, hashtag Kimberly for permanent moderator. And on behalf of all of the members of DC for Democracy, I want to thank all of the candidates who joined us today. It's really helpful to hear your positions on all of the issues and to understand how the leadership that you would bring to the at-large council seat. I'm here to just close us out for the evening and thank all of our participants, everyone who's watching, for joining us. We want you to stay involved. And if you have listened to this presentation and conversation with all of the candidates this evening, I invite you to become a member of DC for Democracy. You can learn more at dc4d.org. There's no cost. We are a grassroots volunteer organization, but we will be voting on an endorsement in this race at our next meeting. And if you have thoughts about who of the candidates we've heard from tonight you would want to see DC for Democracy support, I welcome you to join us at the next meeting, and you can learn more on the website. We don't just endorse though, we put our feet into work too. We will be out this weekend collecting petition signatures for other endorsed candidates who we've already voted to support. You can join us in Mount Pleasant in Ward 1 on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday, February 19th is this coming Saturday. You can register for the event at that link, and one of my colleagues can drop it in the chat if they're able. We'll also be petitioning in Eastern Market, collecting petitions in Eastern Market on Sunday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And you can register at that link, bit.ly/DC4D Eastern. Gathering petition signatures is one of the best ways to hear what people are thinking about in the at-large race, in the ward races, in the mayoral race, and all of the races that'll be on the ballot in June. We want you to stay connected too. You can join our public Facebook group. It's called DC for Democracy if you search on Facebook, and you can be part of the conversation among all of the DC for Democracy members about what folks are thinking about in this race and in the issues that are facing DC voters. You can follow us on Twitter, and anyone is welcome to join our monthly meetups to hear more about how to get involved. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this evening. Stay well, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Alex, you got to cue the music up for the exit too.
I'm working on it. Thank you all. Great to be with you all tonight.
So much. It was good to see all of you.
Love you all.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
luck on the campaign trail, everybody.
Indeed.
Take care.
Thanks to all the other candidates. You guys did a really good job tonight.
Yes.